Hi, I said too loud. I was too loud. I'm always like, hi.
I know, we always do that. I do it too.
Like I'm attacking people with my hi. All right. Okay. Hi. In today's episode, we'll be talking about what makes a good illustration.
When you get a critique on your portfolio, you'll hear terms like composition, values, saturation. We're going to talk about what these terms are and then how to improve them in your illustrations.
There are many aspects to an illustration, and each of these topics could easily be an episode. We're not able to teach that very well in a podcast. This is the kind of stuff that we teach privately on like one-on-one or in classes. So this isn't really the best format to do that, but we're going to try to touch briefly on each topic.
Yes. And we'll be sharing our screen to help with the dialogue, but it won't be an in-depth lesson. And this stuff is not learned in one illustration. It's something that takes a lot of practice to get. So I know what we're going to be talking about it in the podcast, but we are also going to have in the video, you'll be able to see what we are actually sharing, but it should work out.
Yeah, we're going to do our best to verbally describe it. Hopefully it makes sense.
Well, the podcast will cover as to what we're talking about and how to fix it. But we are going to have the video that's going to show samples, physical samples that you can look at really quick. But yeah, it won't be an in-depth lesson. We cannot do that here.
All right. So let's get to it.
Yeah, let's get.
What makes a good composition? Whew, that's a loaded topic. There's a lot. But the main thing with composition is your focal point. You need to have a clear focal point.
So focal point would be where you tell the eye to look first. When you look at an illustration, there is a first read, something you see right away, and then
where your eye goes. Yeah.
Yes, that's your focal point. And then you have secondary reads. It's like when you start looking at the rest of the illustration, you're like, oh, look at this little piece here, look at a little section here. Right. So we're not saying that you cannot have a busy, like say you have a crowd scene. It's fine. You can have a lot of different actions, different people.
Like, where's Waldo?
Exactly. That is. But there is one main action. Like that's where you're going to go first. And then later on, you look around. And you can make the eye do that. You can actually guide the eye to move around the piece. And that's what a good composition is.
Yeah.
So some of the common mistakes in a composition is not necessarily that it's busy, because you can have busy compositions and a crowd scene or with different actions. But when each of those actions is pulling focus away from the first action that you want to see, and it's it could be a problem of the values are wrong. It could be a problem that the contrast, that the saturation of the color is pulling away from the main focus. So your eye doesn't know what to look at first. So that's when we're talking about the problem with focus. And so we do want to talk about the balance and feeling the weight of a piece.
Yeah. Because it can feel heavy on one side and lighter on the other.
Right. And white space doesn't necessarily mean, oh, that's empty, that's light. I mean, that is also negative space. So when we say balancing the weight of the illustration, that doesn't mean I have 3 characters on this side, so I have to put 3 things or 3 characters on this side. That's not what it means.
Yeah.
It could be a shadow on a section of the illustration that feels like it needs something, a shadow coming in, or a doorway, or it depends on the illustration, what it is that you're trying to do. But yeah, you almost feel like the illustration is pulling on one end too much.
Yeah, and in storytelling, especially when you're in a book, you want to pull to the right usually in an image.
Yes, you want to direct the direction.
Because you
the
read
action
left
has
to right.
Right, the action has to go to the right. Yeah. Unless you're trying to do the opposite, that person ran away, because you're telling a story. Yeah. So if you're saying like that person ran away, like you can actually make them
could go to the left. Yeah.
It feels like something is wrong, like something's happening.
So, one thing that's common is people put the object right in the middle, or sometimes they'll just scatter the objects all over the page. and just to try to make it balanced. And yeah, when you do have one object right in the middle and there's like nothing around it, I mean, it's kind of balanced, but it's not very visually exciting.
But there is
You're not really telling
there's
a
a
story.
reason, but there's a reason if you want to put something right in the middle. It has that isolation. So say you're talking about this character that is lost and feeling very vulnerable. You put them in you can put them in the middle of the page, and all the white space around it, it makes it feel very, very small,
Yeah.
and makes it so there's every is we
There's
cannot
a
say
time and
there's a
place
section.
for everything almost. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a section of the paper that is not good to draw in. No, but there is a reason to put things in certain areas.
Yeah.
So you work with the entire piece of paper and to try to convey the feeling that you're trying to convey in the illustration. Yeah, there isn't like, oh, this is a corner that is not good, this is a corner that is good. There are sections that we look at naturally, that we look at first because our eye seems to go there, and then you're talking about the bottom right quadrant. Is that quadrant?
I think so. Yeah.
Of the page, and that's usually when you put your, like something that is quick to read there. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, because if I play with the values and the saturation, I can draw the eye to a complete different corner. So you can choose which way your illustration goes. You're thinking about the horizon line, you're thinking about what's close to you, what's further away, and then all these things come into play when you are illustrating.
Mm-hmm. So another important element in an illustration is line quality. Yeah, what is line quality? It's varying line weight, like the thickness and the thinness of it.
Yes, it's the personality of the line that you're
Mm-hmm.
using. It is in some places you want a thicker line, in some places you want a thinner line. You can even have a non-existing.
Where would you want it thicker and thinner? What would
You
that
can
show?
use line to show weight, to show two objects having a. I'm wearing my glove.
Impact. Oh.
You can show line. Like you use line is part of the language that you're using to illustrate. So you can use it when you're trying to create. What would this be? A
connection?
No.
Overlap?
Why am I out of words today?
Impact.
No, two things.
I feel like we're playing Pictionary. I mean, no, we're playing. I can't even think of it.
Oh my goodness! I push against you, you push against me. What is that?
Pressure.
Like
pressure.
Yeah, like two things going in opposite. But okay, like a pressure point, or you can use it to show weight. You can also use it to help with the action. You can use the quality of line, a thicker line, for example, if you want your eye to go there, and you're trying to emphasize something. So if someone is pointing at something, you can use a line there, a thicker line, to draw your eye to that arm that is extended, to help you continue that action that the character is doing. Because say you have someone pointing, right? You want to follow that arm and want to see what he's pointing at. So you're following the action. So these lines help you do that. You can also have you should definitely have some non-existent lines as well.
Yeah.
Because you want the eye to do some work and to fill in you don't need to have a complete outline on everything you do. It's a more successful line is when it comes in and out. It gets thicker, it gets thinner, it's a broken line. So it's part of the language. It's part of the communication that you're putting in your illustration.
Yeah. And that is something that I've always struggled with. I think because I started, this is going to sound weird, but I didn't have an iPad, or I had a Wacom tablet. And so I would start by drawing drawing on paper with a pen, and then I would scan it into my computer, and then I would convert my line in Adobe Illustrator into a digital line. and I would modify the line that way.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
And
that's a lot of
because
work.
it was a lot of work, but it was because I was used to working in Illustrator and I haven't mastered Photoshop yet. So I was afraid I couldn't draw, and mostly it was because I couldn't draw a clean line in Photoshop on my tablet. Like it was too shaky. I had a hard time drawing, I had a hard time drawing like this and looking at the screen. So I would, to overcome that, I would draw on paper, scan it. I mean, draw in pen and ink on paper, scan it and put it into Illustrator, and then use that line and modify and like change points. Anyway, it was easier for me to draw everything with the same thickness because then it would catch in the scanner, which I got, so I got used to doing that. And now I've had to like train myself to stop doing that because I don't need to do it anymore. And
Right.
it's weird that I had to jump through so many hoops just to try to draw digitally the way I wanted to. And then when I got the iPad, it was like completely changed everything because I could look at it and draw.
I think that when we start drawing, I mean, naturally, when we start drawing as kids, we have a coloring book that has the outline done for us, and we color within that space that's allowed. Yeah, right. So we kind of carry that over, and we always think that a line has to contain the paint, the
Yeah, it has
color
to keep
inside.
it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a while to and there's nothing wrong with having line is it's actually a beautiful thing, and it's part of it.
Mhm.
But you get to a point where you control that line and you use it to help you tell the story and to help the illustration work better, instead of containing your
Yeah.
borders, right? That's, yeah. So no, I can the way you were doing it is just, that's a lot of work. It's
It was nonsense, but no, but
well,
I mean,
you
I
had to
think,
work it.
yeah, but because I came, sorry, one sec, microwave.
I see her. I hear.
I'm just gonna pause. It's only like for 2 seconds. But I think because I came from a graphic design background and I was using Adobe Illustrator so much, I didn't understand how to paint with Photoshop, and I didn't understand how to paint. So I saw things in, solid shapes. When you work in Illustrator and you're doing logos, you always have to make sure your shapes are closed. And so
Yes.
that was a really hard thing for me to transition from. It was really hard for me to transition from loose painting to a loose painting style, a loose drawing style, where before I had to draw everything so, the colors had to be clear and crisp, and the shapes had to be closed, and line had to be closed so you could manipulate it. And so but it's totally different when you're illustrating.
See, that's the huge jump between
Mhm.
traditional illustration and digital illustration.
Yeah. Well, but it's, yeah, and but it's like what we do is digital, but we try to make it look traditional. And so it's interesting when someone goes from painting and traditional fine art into digital painting. For them, that is also hard because but for me, it was the opposite. I was going from digital into digital painting, which is,
You have always been digital
yeah,
from the beginning.
yeah. Even
Oh,
even in school, we worked in, I mean, I worked mostly in Photoshop and Illustrator. Now but I did have painting classes, and we did oil and acrylic and watercolor and pastels. So, but like I said before, it was all online. But
okay.
I was doing it in my home with
Right.
my kids running around me and my oil paintings trying to dry. So yeah, no, I had to do color theory, and I had to do all of that. I mean, I got a bachelor's degree, but it was with it was I would paint it. I would take the class online, paint it, and then put a photo in our classroom online, and we would get critiques online. So it was never like a person standing over me saying, this is how, this is how you should hold the brush. This is how you should do this. This is how
Yeah,
you
there's
mix
definitely
your
a
colors.
benefit to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I still received classes in it. But anyways, those were few classes. And then the rest of my classes were mostly digital. It was all Photoshop, learning how to manipulate images, but typically for graphic design, it was mostly Illustrator.
Wow. Okay. So that I can see now. Yeah. Why line
Yeah.
was so, but even in Illustrator, you can do a,
Yeah.
you can change the quality of the line. You have your thicks and thins. It's comparing it to the iPad where you're actually drawing with a pencil, and the pressure, of
changes it.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
more, it feels more traditional to me. It feels more like
It's
if I'm
more
actually holding a
natural.
pencil. Yes.
Yeah.
And having
I
to
think
click
so.
and then make it make
Yeah.
your curves smaller.
Well, we
Okay.
went off on a tangent there.
We
Sorry.
totally did, but that's fine. And you okay, so
it's the next
we're going to move on from line work. Oh no, there was something I wanted to say about line. So you draw the attention, but when you fill every little section of your line, it just feels overworked and sometimes even boring if the line quality is always the same throughout the entire illustration. So that's why you want to vary it as well.
Another element in good composition is proportions and the relation of elements to each other in the illustration. How do these things fit together in the scene?
So in here, we're not really talking about proportions in like the design of a character. Like we're not talking about how long the arms are, how long the legs are, how long the neck is. We're talking about the relationship in size between the elements that are in your composition, in your illustration.
And how they can influence how you read the illustration.
Yeah. How they fit together in the page. I think we often see is lots of little elements and none of them are overlapping and they're all on the same plane. Of, they're all in the same distance from the viewer. So you want to remember that the paper, although the paper or your canvas is flat, you are drawing a world that actually exists.
In 3D.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there is a background in that paper. There is a middle ground in the paper, and there is a foreground. So you want some of the elements to be large and to come towards the viewer, to be even like right in the front. So they'll be bigger. But you don't want those elements to take away from your illustration. You just want them to exist in there. So that's where your values come in and saturation. But you also want things overlapping. You don't want just little items floating up in the same plane. So that's a big thing to think about.
You're showing distance within the illustration,
right?
Not just everything. Everything is the same size. And also if you make something the wrong size, so if you make something that's in the foreground and you make it too small, it won't read correctly. So if you're trying to show distance, but you don't know the correct proportions to make everything, it might not read correctly.
You confuse the eye. It's just like when you see it here in the real world. If I'm looking at a house that is off in the distance, have you ever I don't know, when we were kids, we would go like this and we would like with our fingers, like if you're going to squish
your
them,
house,
right? When you something so far away in the distance, I crush your head. I mean, we used to do that with our kids, like with our siblings. I'll be like, I'm crushing your head. You squeeze, like you close one eye and you can see the little head. So the same thing, when you can have a house in the distance that will be the same size as a head in of the character, because the character is way closer to you than that house is. So that's how you play around with distance and depth in the illustration. And what helps to that, for it to be an easy read, is to overlap items. Not to always have them, side by side from each other.
And not have them uncomfortably almost touching.
Well, yes.
Like if they're touching, you need to let people know which ones are front by overlapping.
Yeah, we're going to be covering that when we get to
tangents.
When we get to tangents. That's fine. So no, you're right. You want things, you're absolutely right on that. You want the relationship of the items to be comfortable and pleasing, unless the feeling that you're trying to convey is an uncomfortable feeling. See, that all depends on what you're trying to say, right?
Yeah. The story, yeah, the feeling you're trying to convey with the art. Yeah, that's true. So there's no like cut and dry, this is always how it is. Sometimes you want to break the rules a little bit, or
Yes,
bend them.
It's almost those things that you learn the rules so you know when to break them, to get what it is that you're trying to do across.
And you can use pattern and rhythm to move your eye across the page, but not like, we don't mean like patterns on your shirts, like that's not, I mean well, that is a pattern, but you mean like patterns that you see within the image, like maybe you have 3 of something, or they're moving this direction and they're going in that direction. The same with rhythm. Pattern can be in color, pattern can be with line, pattern can be with objects.
It's
repetition.
Your eye naturally goes to things that repeat. Like we read patterns, we're always looking for, oh, there's 3 trees, oh, now there's 5, now there's so like I said, there's always, you can always break the rules to make something uncomfortable if that's what you're trying to do. But generally, when you want things to be pleasing to the eye, you use odd numbers, so 3, 5 elements in it. Because when you use, say, 4 people,
why is that?
It balances, it makes it symmetrical.
It's
too balanced. It's like, oh, okay, it's almost like there's no movement. If I always like refer everything to movement, when you have 4 items, it's an even number, and it stops the movement. It's almost like it stops the story of, well, what if
so when it's even, you stop counting. You're like,
you're like, oh, okay, it's 4, it's okay. So you always add an odd one, the odd one out. It makes it for a more pleasing, exciting,
it leaves you guessing. You're like,
it has something. There's more to the story. Now, if your story has 4 characters in it, you're gonna have 4 characters, but think about what else you can add to that illustration so that it is not so even. Even is sometimes boring, sometimes too so then how do you put 4 characters? Maybe you put one in front of the other. Maybe the way that the body language will give you more interest in it. So anything can be worked out, anything can be made exciting and different. I everything, to me, illustration is all about telling a story. So if you already, it's almost like the story was already told. If there's nothing, something has to be left wondering, what if.
So what are values and how to check them? So values are a common challenge, I think, for artists, for illustrators, but it's such a powerful tool when you're illustrating. But many people don't check it. They just color their art, and then they don't turn it to black and white to check it.
I think at the beginning, how that you're taught, and that's one of the things I stopped doing, which now I make sure that I do. At the very beginning, when you're learning to illustrate, you learn to check the composition, you learn to check your values, so you have value studies before you even start. When you're drawing for a while, you almost stop doing that because you're thinking you're doing instinctively. It's always a good idea to have little thumbnails with your value studies to figure out how you're going to tell this story, this illustration. So not just thumbnails about how the composition is going to go, but also where the values are going to go. For a while, when I switched from traditional to digital, I stopped doing that, and it bit me in the butt.
And it's so easy in digital to just turn the image black and white and take a look at it and shrink it down and make it smaller. You know what, something I just recently, just with the last book, the book that I just started, for the storyboard, because storyboard images are so small, they're like 1 inch by 1 inch squares. I did that. I did a value study on each one, just so I can use that as a reference for when I do the larger pieces. I really think that's going to help me a lot.
Yeah, no, it will, because, oh my goodness, it's when we're talking about values, imagine that there is no color, you're black and white, and you have a flashlight with you. So the flashlight is pointing to your focus. So wherever the flashlight is pointing, that's your higher contrast. And everything else that you don't want it to read right away should fall almost within the same values. I think that would be the way that I would explain it in a podcast when I cannot actually show images. So what you're doing is gonna help you for sure, because you just have to make sure that you're checking your values once you put color, because going into color and having your values, it shouldn't be, but you think about it as two different things, because you have your value studies and then you have your color studies. But now having to put those colors within the value that you want it. But yes, so value would be how much light and how much dark there is in a color, in an image and in a color. And then we're going to talk about saturation, because that one's huge. It makes a difference as well.
So we talked about value. So let's move on to color. How do you use color in the illustration to show, help you emphasize your focal point and have your backgrounds drop back?
So color, you want to start thinking about it as warm and cool. Warm colors, yellows, reds, oranges. Cool colors would be the blues, the purples. The green falls under cool color, but it's very, it depends on where it sits. Yeah, it depends on where it sits in the scale, because if it has a lot of yellow, it pulls more towards a warm. So in reality, you can warm up and cool any color.
True, that's true.
Yeah. So and another thing you can do is use neutral colors like grays and cool them. So you could have an entire illustration all done in grays and have it read as cool grays and warm grays.
Talk about painting. When you choose a color to paint a room, there are so many gray colors. Like there's so many options for gray. It's just, it's mind-boggling. It's really difficult to choose a gray.
Right, because do you have a purplish gray? Do you have a bluish gray? Do you have a greenish gray? Do you have a yellowish gray?
Or a pinkish gray. Yeah, there's so many.
Gray is a fantastic color, and people sometimes don't think of it as a color. It because you can do so much with it. You can turn it into anything you want, because it's really just black and white in it, and a tint of a color of whatever you want it. You want to warm it up or you want to cool it off.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you think about colors, you want to have in your head, you're trying to warm up a section or you're trying to cool. When you're cooling things off, they tend to push back,
to recede,
and then when you warm things up, they seem to come closer to the viewer. So you can use that to your advantage. So say in an illustration, like I'll go back to the flashlight. You are pointing something with a flashlight. Even though you also have to think about what kind of light source you're using. So the sun is warm, it's warm light. So you can actually think, I'm trying to like gather my thought here.
I guess so. For example, if artificial light could be bluer, whiter,
could be cool light,
cooler.
Yeah. So, but if you're doing an illustration and you're already doing your entire background as cool because you want it to fall back, you can go ahead and warm up that flashlight light, even though it's an artificial light. And so wherever the light would hit it, you just warm up the color a little bit. Not only do you lighten it, but you warm it up as well. So you can add a bit of a yellow tint to it, or whatever other color it is. Sometimes I like to use this baby blue color to show reflective light, but then reflected light also depends on what environment you're in. All these things can be extracted from the real world. Okay, and then what you're trying to do is replicate that into an illustration, but make it more magical than just a picture.
Yeah, because you're not tracing or replicating real life. You have a little more leeway and
this is a personal, your personal signature as an artist, whatever you want. I prefer when illustrations are not so uberly realistic that it could be confused to a photograph. For that, I'll just take a picture. If it's going to be so close to a picture, then you might as well take a picture. You want to add, I think something about illustration is that it seems real enough. The characters are real. They live in this real place, and they're believable, but
Yeah.
they still have that sense of magic too. That wow, I want to be there. I want to be in that little area. So you do that with all of it, with everything that we have discussed this far, but also with the way the light and the color fall on the characters.
Yeah. And that, well, there is some art that like we've mentioned this before, that is just, it's flat, maybe with some textures, but there's different styles
Yes,
to illustration. And some have more, use this more to tell their story, and some use it less. It's subjective.
it is. It is.
Uh yes. So color harmonies are pleasing color combinations like monochromatic, analogous, complementary, split complementary. I can't say the other two.
Triadic and
Triadic,
tetradic.
tetradic. That's it. I cannot say tetradic. It's hard.
So
Um,
you can look those up. We're not going to give any
yeah.
specific, but we can talk about how to use them.
Oh,
A lot of it depends on the style, but I think I prefer to say that it depends on the illustration you're trying to do.
yeah.
And again, the feeling and the story that you're trying to tell in that illustration. But you do have your go-to colors
Yeah.
that you're that you feel comfortable using, that they don't
Yeah.
um yes. So in monochromatic, you would leave, it means that everything is the same family, the same color.
Mm-hmm.
But even there, you have different values to it, lighter and darker. And
Yeah.
even within that, you can still cool it and warm it up.
Yes. So
So
yeah.
that's what we were talking about. If you
Yeah.
have a painting that is all gray, it's a monochromatic painting, but you still can have differences within that color, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can have your cool ones and your warm ones,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the saturation of it as well. Okay, um, so when we talk about you have your favorite color, you can also have something that like we used to call a mother color in school, and that is
I don't remember that term.
it
Yeah,
was just one
that's
specific
interesting.
teacher that would say that to us, like. And so when we were painting with oil and acrylic, and I try to use that a little bit in digital. So that's a good thing, is when you learn something to done the traditional way and you figure out how to translate it to digital, it works well, because it's a tried and true method of painting. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a mother color, which is one color that you add a little bit of that to your entire painting, and
Oh,
it
okay.
makes it cohesive. That's the word. It
Yeah.
makes it cohesive. It makes it live in the same world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for us, we would do our underpainting, say a sepia, and then we would go ahead and paint our drawing. So then our painting, so everything has that sepia tone to it underneath. It just makes it. I mean, it just makes it better than just going straight on the white canvas. Now, digital, I paint on the white canvas, but you can also sometimes do an overlay of a mother
Yeah.
color,
Yeah.
right? And then you can erase out of it,
Yeah.
because you obviously don't want, like, say, a purple to muddy up your lights too much. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to, like, it's a little bit of give and take, but yeah, that's what a mother color would be, to have
And
everybody.
that's why I like digital, because you can have layers and you can remove
Yes.
some of the layer or make it more opaque,
One thing about digital
less
is like
opaque.
it's not easier to work in it, in the sense of, if you cannot draw, you're not going to be able to draw digitally or traditionally. You have to know how to do it. It's more complicated in the sense that you have to learn more things, but it does make editing and changes a little bit easier. There, you're able to do things that would take a lot more effort to do, to accomplish traditionally.
And time. It's
Oh my goodness,
huge
yes.
time saver.
Yes.
You don't have to start all over from the beginning.
Oh, we're going to talk about my favorite subject.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
tangents.
Oh,
I even like
well,
the name of the word tangent. I see a tangent.
Olga sees tangents everywhere.
I do. And so this, when I was in college, there was this professor, and he was a tangent police. Before I became the tangent police, he was a tangent police,
He was
and
your
he
mentor.
would catch them. It's funny that sometimes you don't. We have talked about this in another episode. You don't know what you don't know. So I actually read this morning an article is about psychology, that you see everything, but you don't know you're seeing it until you already know that it exists. So everything is out
Oh.
here in the world already. Things that are easy for other people to see, you're seeing it too, but you don't know that they exist, that you're not aware of them yet.
Uh-huh.
So that's what I would say with tangents.
Yeah.
Tangents are,
if
go
he
ahead.
hadn't, so I think if he hadn't been, he hadn't ingrained that so much into your training.
Yeah. I would not see them as often.
Yeah.
But I'm glad he did.
You'd
I'm
be
really glad he
tangent
did,
blind.
because I understand the power they have to actually take a good illustration and make it stop. And sometimes you don't know why. You're like, oh, what, something about it doesn't feel right. And usually, well, not usually, it's easy to see. Sometimes you're like, oh, it's because this object is held by another line. It's not allowing it to move within that space. When I illustrate something, I wanted to feel, and this is me, my personal preference, I wanted to feel like that we just took a little snapshot of a moment that is happening. Like I just walked into a room and this is what I found in the middle of the action. And I don't mean action in the sense of like, oh, there's so many things happening.
Like a lot of movement.
Yeah,
But
not always. Sometimes
yeah.
it's a quiet illustration, but that when I want to feel that if I stay there long enough, something else is going to happen. That there's going to be a continuation to that illustration, right?
Mhm.
So when you have a tangent, it seems to hold that character in one place. It's weird that once you see it, you see it. So what are we're talking about tangents, but we haven't described what they are.
So tangents are two lines that meet touching. What?
Right. That are touching. That
Oh, two lines are touching.
Yeah.
So does that mean like it can be like, so basically like they're creating an angle, right? It's creating an angle with those two lines.
No. It's because it could be a curve and a straight. So they don't always create an angle.
Okay.
Sometimes you have say you have a head, but let me see. Oh, I'm on video. So I'm trying to create a tangent. So here's my head.
Well, am I creating a tangent here?
No. A tangent is when two lines touch, and then your eye doesn't know which line to continue. So
I see
for
what
example,
you're saying. The line isn't disappearing into the other line. It's where the
here, I'm
two
going to
lines
create
meet.
A tangent right now.
They meet.
If I put my pencil here for an illustration, I'm putting a pencil on my forehead, like if I'm thinking, right? Okay. So it is at an angle. There's nothing there. There's no tangent. But if I do this, do you see how I am following the line of the glasses with the line? That's a tangent. Mm-hmm. So now your eye is going to go away from my face. It's going to follow that pencil because I created a tangent. And it usually happens with something in the background that is touching your element of action, that is touching the character. So what ends up happening is your eye ties your character with the background and it becomes a static image
It's
at that
uncomfortable.
moment. Yeah, and it just won't move. It won't allow
Yeah.
that character to keep moving. It's impossible to avoid every single line out there. But if a line is in the background and it is subtle enough, it's fine. It is when it creates, like when it's a strong line that happens
Yeah.
to meet another line in your character and creates an uncomfortable tangent.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we described it good enough,
And
but I
so
think it's
but
easier.
when that happens, what do? You overlap, right?
If it's,
Or move
yes,
it.
either separate it, if you can separate it, or
Mhm.
make an overlap, like move it in more so that it is not touching the edge of your character, or lighten that line, or break it
Mhm.
up. Don't make it a solid line. There's many
Yeah.
things you can do. For example, if my character is standing in front of a building and the edge of the building happens to coincide with the edge of the character's
Anywhere, his face or
glasses.
arms. Yeah.
Well, say he has a glass, yeah, and the edge of a building is right at the edge of his face.
Yeah.
That creates a tangent. So that ties that character to that edge of that building. But your
Yeah.
building is in the background. So you have two options. Either you move that character over so that the edge of the building falls more inside of his, behind his head. So
Behind his head.
you
Yeah.
have clearly overlapped that
Mm-hmm.
object. Or if it's really, really far in the distance, then you can just lighten that line a lot. Or
Mm-hmm.
you can put a tree behind the character, or you can break that line up.
Yeah.
There's many ways of fixing it, but that's what you don't want. That's a tangent.
Yeah. It's kind of like a law of attraction. Those two objects look like they're being attracted to each other, but
Yeah.
they're not. They shouldn't be. They need to overlap.
So it's like when you're. I keep saying that illustrations are more like a moment. Like if you have frozen a moment in time. So imagine that there's a movie and the person is walking in front of the building. You don't stop right when he
right
touches
before the
the corner.
building. Yeah.
Yes, you go ahead and let him overlap, then you
Yeah.
stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be uncomfortable.
And
I
speaking of uncomfortable,
yeah. Oh, uncomfortable. I think we spoke about
well, I know
negative
another thing
space.
is when two items are so close together that it creates that uncomfortable feeling. That now this
Yeah.
is not a tangent. This is when your negative space between two items is too close for comfort.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, you're better off overlapping or separating them more,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because your eye gets trapped in that little corridor between them.
Wow.
Wow, this wasn't an easy podcast, an easy episode for a podcast,
Yeah.
because a lot of these elements is something you have to be able to see,
Yeah.
to understand. And this is when we're doing like lessons, or when we have like mentorships, this is what we do. We draw over and we explain this easier, so that with sharing our screen, we can do that in a podcast. But at
No.
least these are the elements that you should be looking out for, to pay attention to, if you want your illustrations to be a little bit more successful.
Mm-hmm. I think that about wraps it up. It doesn't matter how much we talk about this and you learn the terms. It's actually putting these things into practice is the only way that you're going to learn it and internalize it. At some point, it becomes easier and you don't have to pay as much attention to what you're doing, and it'll just become instinctive.
Right, yes. Okay, I hope this was helpful. It might have been a little bit confusing, because it is difficult to do it in a podcast. It's hard to talk about these things without showing what we're talking about. But at least it gives you an idea of what these terms mean, and what are some of the common mistakes that we encounter when we're starting out in illustrating. To make it easier, we are going to go on video now and show our screen just a quick sample of what we're talking about. So if you have the ability to go to to YouTube,
To the
or
YouTube.
to the
Yeah.
YouTube, lovely, lovely. So I'll let you do that. So if you have the ability,
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. Go to the YouTube.
you know the
Find our video.
interwebs. Go to the interwebs and you'll find the YouTube.
You know. Yeah, okay. Okay, man, let's stop. Okay, sorry. Thank you for all your support. We really appreciate all the comments and the reviews. If you like this, share with someone and let them know that you found something interesting in what we're saying. And also, like we said before, we're on YouTube and you can watch what we're doing while we're talking.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.